Hello and welcome to the channel today. Today we're going to be looking at sharpening the irons on this or any other hand plane. Some of the tools we're going to be using today to accomplish this, we're going to need some type of sanding material or some way of sharpening your irons. There's many ways of doing this, but today I'll show you how I sharpen my plane irons. First of all, you'll need some type of very flat surface. Here's what I use. This is just a plain old cheap glass cutting board found at any of your big box stores or hardware stores. And I used the back side of it, not the glass side of it, because it tends to be textured. We'll need some type of sanding material or abrasive to sharpen our irons with. And I like to use this Sun Gold abrasive, but you can use any type of rolled abrasive that has a sticky surface on the back. I like to use 150 grit on there, and then I'll show you why I prefer this and how I use it to go through the entire process. It comes in this roll. You can get it from any of your automotive centers that sells painting supplies is where I get this from. But it comes in this big roll, big sheet, usually come 10 yards per roll, 4.5 inches wide, and it makes for a really good surface for sharpening things such as your plane irons that are a little bigger. So you don't need anything but a flat surface, a clean flat surface, and some of this stuck down to get the entire job done. So to make sure that we get the correct angle of our sharpening done, we'll use this sharpening guide today. This guide is made for sharpening both chisels and plane irons. On the side of this, I don't know if you can see that well, but it has different settings for the degree of angle you like to sharpen your tools at. I like to keep mine at 25 degrees. So if we look at this setting here for flat irons today, we'll notice that it says for 25 degrees we need the blade out at 50 millimeters. To make sure we get that correct, we'll be just using a small ruler to accomplish that today. So to take our blade, or our iron out of our plane, loosen the nut here, twist that out, push it up a little bit, and then twist it to the side, and then go ahead and slide it out of the slot there, like so. And we'll set the chip breaker aside. Now we take the guide, we put the bevel down, and we tighten this up to where it's just barely snug, so we can still adjust it just a little bit. We take our ruler and we measure from the side of the tool out until we get to 50 millimeters. And we continue adjusting that until we got it exactly where we want it. And that looks to be about right. So we snug that on down just a little bit. Then we'll just snug it down using part of the plane here. Now, all set, right? So to start using this, we need just a little bit. This is wet paper. So we need to use just a little bit of some type of liquid on our surface. Squirt bottle full of just normal tap water. Just lightly spray the surface down a little bit. I'm going to take a magic marker so we know for sure that the material's being taken off, and let's just go ahead, mark across the entire surface of that plain iron. There, the cutting bevel, and we'll see how then the material's taken off then. So we don't want to push with this, we want to pull, and we want to use most of the surface that we can, but keeping our tool guide and the bevel on the surface at all times. So we will come up to the front of our sanding paper, pull back, stop, take it back to the front, pull back, and we continue this motion. Constant pressure down on the tool, pulling straight back. I like to do it one-handed, over putting the pressure down. We use two hands. One hand's going to push harder than the other. So one-handed. And then if we look at our tool, then we'll see that our material is taking the black magic marker off, but I see just a little bit here of black magic marker that's still not coming off on that tip. Now that means that we may have our measurement wrong here. So let's look at it again and make sure we didn't measure it wrong. Look at our measurement, and we have, my measurement was off by about 1 millimeter when I tightened it up. So let's loosen it up just a little bit. I'll take that back just a little bit. Look at it again here. Tighten it back up. Check it one more time, and then let's see what happens now. So back to the front, even stroke all the way back. I'll take a couple strokes here and look at it again, and we'll see now that it is taking that material off. So back to the front. And keep working this. We'll take a few strokes. Use all of your sandpaper, both left and right on your sandpaper here. You don't want to just use what's on the front there. You can move all the way over to the side, all the way over, left and right. Now you'll notice I have 2 strips of sandpaper down here, and that's not by accident. And I'm not going to use both of them for the same thing. I'm going to start off with a fresh piece of sandpaper every single time. That is for my first set of sanding. After I get all of my material and I start to create that burr on the back of my plane iron, and I'm going to keep feeling for that, then I'm going to switch to the sandpaper that I used before. You see that you can tell how dirty it was before from where I was sanding with it. So what I'll do is in a minute, before I start to use this, I'll take some water, I'll squirt this off using a trash can or something, and we'll take all that material, that dirty portion of that sandpaper off, get all the metal flakes and everything that's out of it from the last time I used it, and that way I don't have to buy 2 separate abrasives of sandpaper. This one is already worn down, so that'll save you some money in the long run. So let's work on this a little bit more. Long strokes, but make sure you keep your plane iron down and your guide both in contact. And nice, even, full strokes. Now, when we get to about half the job done, we want to turn this around because we want to use the sandpaper out equally, and we're not getting all the way to the end of that sandpaper. So let's hit it with just a little bit more of our water spray up there at the top because we're pulling it backwards. So back all the way up, and we want to use that end of the sandpaper and make sure that we're getting the even wire out of it. Because remember, we're going to use this half of it next time as our secondary sharpening. Now this shouldn't take too much. If you keep after your tools the way you're supposed to and sharpen them about after every use, then this shouldn't take too long. And I'm feeling that burr now just come across on that surface, and it's starting to be very, very sharp. Okay, now when we get to the end though, almost to the end, we want to tilt using the outer edges of our sandpaper. We want to tilt it up just a little bit to one side and pull that back, because remember, we don't want those very sharp angles on the tips of our irons or it digs into our wood. So we tilt it up. Let's do 10 or so strokes on this side. And then switch over. We'll do about 10 strokes on this side. And that just takes off that little edge, that little point in each of those corners there. I see that I didn't barely get this edge done like I did the others. Let's do a few more strokes on this right hand side here. All right, that's looking good now. So they took all of our black magic marker off of there and got just a burr on the back of that. That's how we're going to leave it. All right, so before we switch over to our other sandpaper, we're going to take the flat side, we're going to lay it down on the very edge of our sandpaper here, holding it very flat, about the first 2 inches probably of our iron, and we're just going to take a couple of strokes. 5, let's try that. We're going to feel it, and there, it's taking that burr back off of it. But still, we're very nice and sharp already, but we're going to continue now on our other side. So I'm going to spray that sandpaper off using just my spray bottle of water. It's nice and wet now there, but you'll see most of that, the particulates that came from sharpening my blade last time are now sprayed off of there. Now back now onto this side, and we're going to do about the same number of strokes we did on the last one. So remember, keep even pressure. Let's use as much of the sanding paper as we can. Keep it even as possible. I'm going to take several strokes here. Continue to work that. I'm going to stop after 15 or so strokes. I'm going to take a look at it, make sure everything's still going well. I'm going to feel for that burr back there. Not hardly yet, but man, is it getting sharp. Let's run it a few more times here. Let's keep pulling it. About 10 more strokes. I'm going to take a look at it again. All right, let's stop there and take a look at it. Okay, I'm starting to feel that burr, but not hardly all the way across. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our board around because we want to use it all evened out. Keep our paper abrasive even all the way. We're going to long strokes, pushing down with that one hand there, all the way back, using our board all the way across. Pull it all the way back, but make sure you're keeping pressure. I can use those two fingers right there in the middle so I can push down evenly. Keep my hand wrapped around it so I'm controlling the whole unit with my hand. Pulling all the way back, but don't run off the end. Stop before you get to this end down here because you don't want to start messing with that bevel. All right, let's take a look at it for a second. Let's start feeling of it just a little bit. Almost got that burr all the way across now. Almost. Starting to really shine up though. Let's take a look at it. We'll feel it just a little bit. Oh, it's really taking shape. We're going to do a few more strokes here with it. Let's try about 10 more. All right. So, let's feel it now. Yeah, okay. I'm feeling that burr all the way across now, but like we did before, we want to address these two edges here, and we're going to go to the outside edge of our paper. We're going to tilt this machine over on its side, and we're going to just slowly pull these back. Nice, even strokes. Just leave it tilted over just a little bit. Take about 5 to 10 strokes with it. And let's take a look at it. All right, we're going to switch to the other side. Good tilt on it. Pull that all the way back and take a look at it. About 10 strokes or so. Having that slight bevel on those two sides will prevent the chisel edge from biting into the wood and creating a line across your material as you plane them. Need just a little bit more right on this edge here. Want to keep them even. Look at it again here for a second. Just a little more. This edge may not be cutting as good as the other. All right, let's take a look at it. Oh yeah, that looks good now. All right, so we have that burr up on that backside now we need to address. And just like before, we're going to grab our iron and flip it over. And off the edge with just about an inch or so material, and we're going to lay that iron flat on our sanding surface. We're going to just move it back and forth. About 10 strokes here. Want to keep it nice and flat, and this keeps it doing so. That may be enough. Let's feel it and make sure. Have just a little bit of burr left, so let's hit it one more time, about 10 more strokes. Make sure you push down pretty firm. Keep it flat on the surface at all times. Move it straight back and forth. Just that first inch or so of your plane iron on the surface. And then wipe it off. We'll look at it. Feel for that burn. It feels good. Something you can do now as a last step, take a piece of leather, and you don't need this portion on it anymore for this. We're just going to pull back on the work just a little bit, and we're going to just a micro burr that from using your iron on these surfaces produces, and it flip flops back and forth when you use the sanding material. So we're just going to drop this a few times. You could charge this surface if you wanted to with some kind of polishing compound, but when I'm really not after that, I'm just wanting to use this to clean that micro burr up from both sides. I'll just keep feeling it, and we'll keep working it here a little bit. We'll feel that, and we're going to do it on the other side as well. So I'll pull it over to the edge, and we're just going to pull back on it just a little bit here. Pull straight back on it. We'll feel it. You can just barely feel that micro bead of material that's on there. And don't forget to lean it over on the edges and touch those little bits of edge where you touch up those corners to keep them from cutting into the wood. And I believe that's got it. Let's put a nice polish on the back here, and our blade is just gorgeous. It's nice and super sharp. I mean, it's very, very sharp right now at this point. And that's what you want. You want to make sure that your blade iron stay nice and sharp. It produces nice, clean cuts on your wood, and makes finishing off your wood much easier, much faster, as long as that bevel's good. So we're going to do something right quick. We're finished with this, so we'll set it aside. We want to bring that chip breaker out here just for a second. We want to take a look at it. Now, we're not going to put an edge on the chip breaker like we would on our blade, but we do want to make sure that that stays nice and level there on that surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take the back side of that chip breaker just a little bit, and we're just going to run it back and forth just a few times on the surface and make sure that that's nice and level. And then what we're going to do is kind of polish this edge a little bit, and we're going to keep it nice and flat. So how we're going to do that is we're going to keep it in our hand, and we're going to kind of guide it with one hand and do the work with the other, and we're going to kind of pull it toward us and then curl it toward the end as we do, like this. So if you want to do it one-handed, which I prefer doing it one-handed, just pull it for you. Now, let's make sure we're going to use the sanding paper that we've, it's the old one, not the new one for this. Put some water down on the surface or whatever you use, Windex, some people use or whatever. But let's just curl this back, just curl it to the edge. Just pull it toward you. We don't have to use all the surface, but whatever stroke is comfortable for you to come about half an inch up onto the back or the top of the arch here, and then work our way down to the surface here. So let's just make sure we got enough room for that, and just go back and forth on your surface. Remember, we're trying to keep our sandpaper worn at about the same level. So we're going to use about half of our sandpaper for this. About 20 strokes, and we're going to take a look at it. Again, we're not sharpening it. We're wanting to keep it smooth, though, and we're wanting to make sure that this surface is ready to knock those chips off. And, having it somewhat smooth and slightly with a sharp edge on this side. Not a cutting edge, but a sharpened edge on that surface to make sure that the chips are knocked out of our way as our blade does the cutting. So let's run this through. Just a few more strokes on this side. Make sure that you keep this smooth in a fluid motion. We don't want to wear one side to the other. We want to keep this as straight as possible. And we're going to take and we're going to switch our material around again, and we're going to make sure to hit it one more time. And again, we're going to keep our surface as even as we can as we go. It's a good idea. The common one that you use most of the time, common planes that you use most of the time, that you kind of get those all together and kind of have a between time sharpening session and sharpen all your tools at one time. Now, when you get all your materials out, and it's all sharpened, shined up there now and polished. That edge, looks really well. I'm going to take, and while I have the strop out, and I'm just going to go over that a few times, kind of with the same motion as I had before. And we're not working no bead, micro bead of metal or nothing up on that edge, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's just run over this while we got it out a few times and just work it back and forth. Again, you could charge the surface with some type of polishing compound if you wanted to. Not necessary. And just kind of smooths things out a little bit, if you will. All right. I think that's got it. Let's put this thing back together. So, set that there. I don't want to set it down in the water. Let's take our blade and our chip breaker. Let's make sure we get that thing back together the right way. But first, we'll take the nut hole there. We're going to take it about halfway, and then we're going to just turn that thing into each other. And then we're going to turn it around, and we're going to pull that blade down till we get like a 1/16 of an inch from where it's supposed to go up here. The blade coming off the end, about 1/16 of an inch. And then we're going to kind of hold it in place and kind of snug it up just a little more, or we can still move it just a little bit. And we want that thing from side to side straight and from left to right. We want to make sure that the same amount of cutting surface is left open and the sides of the blade are also from left to right. So about a 1/16 of an inch, about like that, if you can see. And then we're going to finish snugging that thing down the rest of the way. Now, after we snug that down, we want to look at it one more time and make sure that we didn't knock it out of whack. It's still where it's supposed to be, and it is about a 1/16 of an inch there sticking over the end. And then make sure that goes facing down, and it's got a little slot there for it. Make sure it seats down in there properly. And then snap it back into place. It's a good idea. I didn't do it here, but it's a good idea to take a little bit of your oil. Machine oil or 3-in-1 oil. I have a little jar here that I have just a rag stuff down into, and every once in a while I charge the surface, which sticks out, 1/16 or a ½ inch above the surface of the jar here, but it's got that 3-in-1 all charged in it, and So you can just take your tools as you finish with them, or you lay them down on the surface and just wipe that up on them a little bit, and put a little bit of oil back into those surfaces and keeps them from rusted. Helps them guide through the wood also. So stick those back through there. Set those back up again, and we'll look at it here as we set that in there. Make sure that it's set in there properly. And then where we set our plane down on any of the surfaces that may have had our water material here, we just run over that plane base with our oil container here, and wipe the sides down as well. Helps everything guide through the material good. Now we've got our plane ready for our next project. So, well, that's all the time we have today. I hope that you have found this lesson, or this little tip or trick, if you will, and sharpening one of your plane irons to be helpful. Also, it's very budget friendly if you don't have a lot to spend on tools or stuff to keep them in good working order. This is a cheap and inefficient way to do so. Probably the most expensive portion of this whole project is to buy this roll of sandpaper, but again, it's got 10 yards of abrasive on it in this roll, and as you can see, we usually use about 18 inches on this cutting board. I think I spent $3 at our local Rose's department store here on this cheap cutting board, and it usually lasts several cuttings of on some of the planes. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you. God bless you, and have a great day.